Welcome once again to Sid Caudle, Christian People's Alliance. Welcome, Sid. And you've been very naughty, my spy tells me, because it is alleged that you've put a firebomb through the letterbox of Sir Keir. Apparently, in North London, he has a house there that he is worth a bob or two, £2 million, and he lets it out. Apparently, the porch has been badly damaged. Fortunately, this was at 1:30 last night, not the house. They're keeping stum. They're saying nothing, but this is a guessing game. But I bet it's right that this was somebody getting a bit of their own back here from the mess he's made about everything.
Well, you may say that, but I couldn't possibly comment.
What way to shut Sid Caudle up? There you go. I found it. Yes, I tell you what, Sid. Now this is serious. It's mooted at the moment. He's one of the most hated men in Britain.
Yes,
And if you want the official SP on the streets, he's got overseas itis, and it's
yes,
relatively simple to get sucked in to the mighty bureaucracy and think you're bigger than you are when you meet all these people around the world. And he better start looking at home because that's where his votes are.
well, yes. Now, you see, it's interesting. I've said before that Keir Starmer's, not pursuing his manifesto and basically wasn't ready for government. I mean, it's very interesting. When he was first elected, he stood there in the House of Commons and kept referring to Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister. He didn't actually realise that he was now Prime Minister. He was like, "Oh, I'm elected, am I? Oh, I'm Prime Minister now, am I?" And it was almost as though, it's just like, "Oh, I'm not used to this. I'm used to opposing. I'm not used to actually making decisions and running something." So it seemed very clear to me he wasn't ready for government. But now something else has happened. What's now happening is that Keir Starmer is talking a good job, but not actually doing it. So today we've had this thing about immigration. Keir Starmer has announced he's going to seriously clamp down on immigration and he's going to drastically reduce the numbers. Okay. But we haven't seen it in reality. In reality, immigration's gone up enormously. That's the truth. That's what's happened. He's cancelled the Rwanda scheme, which was one deterrent to people coming over here because they were going to be shipped off to Rwanda. And Keir Starmer says, no, we don't want that, and cancelled the scheme. So that's actually encouraged more people to come without a shadow of doubt, because beforehand there were increased numbers going to Ireland because, of course, they didn't have the Rwanda scheme. But now the numbers going to Ireland have gone down enormously because they're coming back to the UK again. So that's the reality. And it's the same in with the economy. I mean, he talks a good job on the economy, but the reality is he's made a complete and utter mess of it. And people now are getting very angry and getting very upset because, it's not working. What he's doing isn't working. So,
Well,
yes.
he's known, of course, as two-tier Sir Keir, but I would just christen him as one-dimensional in that he thinks he can right the wrongs by passing laws. And if it
Yes.
isn't within his orbit, then it's not going to happen. And it isn't within his orbit. You can't change hearts and minds with laws.
Yes, absolutely. But you see, the thing is, he's not thought through what he's doing. You see, I remember the days of Margaret Thatcher, and Margaret Thatcher said, people may disagree with me now, but in time they'll see that I'm right. Everything she did, she thought through very carefully what the implications were, what the results were going to be, what the effect was going to be, and how things were going to work out. And at the end of her time as Prime Minister, people said Margaret Thatcher's transformed the economy. But at the time, it's like, okay, maybe I'm popular, but what I'm doing is necessary for the country. With Keir Starmer, I mean, some of the things he's saying are the same. It'll take a while for the measures that we're putting into effect to actually, to bear the benefit, but in time there'll be a benefit of the measures we're putting in place. Really? Okay, well, what measures are you putting in place? Well, we're increasing taxes and we're increasing spending on the NHS. and we're cutting benefits. I mean, we've got rid of the winter fuel allowance, and we're cutting disability benefits. And yeah, okay. So in time, these are going to bear fruit, aren't they? But actually, debt has continued to go up enormously because even though you're increasing spending on the NHS, we haven't actually seen any benefits of it. And this idea that you're getting rid of NHS England, well, that's going to be in 2 years' time anyway. So we haven't seen any benefits of that. We haven't seen an improvement in the NHS. We've seen an increase in taxes, and we've also got this thing about taxing non-doms, which has driven lots of millionaires abroad, which has actually reduced the tax revenue. I mean, there's no benefit coming from anything that he's doing. It's all complete nonsense.
It's all right, blaming, for instance, Margaret Thatcher and the poll tax. That was one. But everything he touches turns to dust. I'll give you another example. Well, more than one example, but certain figures, data's come out this week. My goodness me, that the winter fuel savings that he wiped out for the people in need, £15 billion. That's exactly what it's going to cost in the next 10 years for the migrants in hotels, the hotel bill. I mean, it's utter madness.
Well, yes, of course it is. But it's also, as I've said before, he set up 28 new quangos. And, in the election, we were complaining that the spending on quangos had gone up to 265 billion. The latest figure now is 353 billion. So, we're not talking about small amounts of money. We're talking about 88 billion pounds that's being spent on quangos under Starmer than was being spent even a year ago. I mean, and when you think we saved 2 billion by getting rid of the winter fuel allowance, it just shows that he doesn't know what he's doing. That's the simple answer is he's everything, the economy is completely out of control.
Something interesting today, which is opposite to what we're talking about now. Newspaper headlines saying shoplifting dramatically increased from pensioners. They can't afford to eat. Now, we've got to drill down to this a bit because the pensioner generation, morally, dare one say, perhaps I'm going to get into trouble for saying this, are a degree or so higher than maybe a lot of the other generations that we now hear about. And when you look at the figures, yes, dramatic rise in shoplifting, but it's from the males, not the grannies. Now, again, drilling down, it looks as though it's the guys living under railway arches with maybe drink or drug problems that are doing this. They're using it as an excuse. But a lot of the media takes what does Sakir want? Does he want this happening on his own doorstep? Well, literally. No, he doesn't. But I'm afraid this is perhaps the media going a bit OTT. And
Well, what's happened there is that the police have announced that they're not going to charge anyone who steals less than £200 from a shop.
yeah, yeah.
And having made that announcement, if you're a petty criminal, you think, okay, fine, I can just go and take a bottle of wine and no one's going to do anything. I mean, it's still a civil offence, of course. I mean, the shop can sue them. But in terms of a criminal offence, the police have said we're not going to take any action.
Mm.
Now, you think what they are taking action over, and I mean, there's a friend of mine who's facing a court case shortly because he did a demonstration on Tower Bridge about the fighting in Darfur that he was concerned wasn't being publicised. He's facing a possible prison sentence for it. And we've had several people have been charged for praying silently outside abortion centres. There's another friend of mine who was charged for telling the police that he thought mass murder was going on in Bournemouth because of the abortions and sent them pictures of aborted babies. The police have charged him with criminal offence for that, and he was actually told that he could face prison for doing that. Now, to me, the police have just got it completely wrong. And plus, of course, there's been numerous street preachers that have been arrested for causing offence. But, it's just like, okay, so we don't arrest anyone that steals less than £200 worth of goods from a shop, but we do arrest anyone who says something offensive or does something offensive. And
Well, offensive, Sid, to whom? This is the problem with the law of offence. Some people are not offended, others are. But is that their problem?
well, you see, actually, when these cases have been brought to court, I mean, particularly in the case of street preachers, the courts have said repeatedly no one has a right not to be offended. But the police are arresting and charging people for causing offence. So, it's almost as though the police are saying, we're not interested in what the courts say. But you see, the reason I've raised this is because it's such a contrast with theft. I mean, to me, they should have a policy when it comes to theft, burglary, whatever it is, of saying we've got zero tolerance. Anyone who steals from a shop, they're going to be dealt with, they're going to be charged. And if you take that sort of approach, zero tolerance to theft, theft will go down. If you say, we're not going to charge anyone that steals less than £200 worth of goods from a shop, obviously theft is going to rise exponentially. I mean, it's just foolish. It's just stupid in my book.
We're closely following that case that you've mentioned, as you are. There is history in that part of the world. It's a hotbed of LGBT and
You talk
friends.
about Bournemouth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And allegedly, the judge is not of the type that would be flexible enough to see where we're headed to on this. There's history there, I repeat.
You're right. Unfortunately, we're talking about David Skinner here now. Unfortunately, he's got the support of the Christian Legal Centre. And the Christian Legal Centre are currently considering whether they're going to appeal against the sentence. And hopefully they will appeal and will win that case. And it's the Christian Legal Centre that have defended all the street preachers, and not a single conviction have the police got. I mean, but you see, the thing is, as far as I'm concerned, it's just nonsense that these people are being charged. Utter nonsense.
Must mention another nonsense. Maybe people don't have a lot of sympathy here, but it's surprising when laws are passed and powers given to local authorities, how they abuse their power. We've been mentioning for the last couple of weeks of second homes that have brought wealth to hither. Well, I mean, if you go and some of the smaller ports in Wales and in Cornwall, they've been on the breadline for donkey's years. Then somebody says, oh, what a lovely beach, what a lovely harbour, let's buy a house. And it's brought great wealth. Now, the spin-off for all this is that mum and dad have both passed away, and they leave to daughter and son the house. But if that house is one of these retirement homes, beware, it comes with handcuffs. One of the handcuffs is the massive council tax bill that they will have to pay before selling the house. Indeed, if they occupy it, they'll pay it. But they don't want it.
I think you mean capital gains tax bill, you mean?
No, this is just council tax. Because it's a second home. They've deemed it as a second home. The greedy local authority, and it gets worse. A lot of these retirement homes are paying up to £4,000 a year for service charges because they're especially catering for the old people. So that's £8,000 a year going out. The market has fallen on this type of home. Nobody wants to buy it for many reasons, but I've given you two. And you're saddled with a house, and certain people have received from mum and dad a house worth £250,000 and selling it for under £100,000. I mean, this is just political envy that I'm afraid the socialists are still, it is still their philosophy.
Well, that's right. That's something else about this government, which I find disturbing, frankly. Um, you see, they've said during the election, to be fair, that they were going to be a government for working people. And one of the first things they did when they got onto power was to pay the unions who were taking industrial action basically what they wanted. So they settled all the disputes by paying out, and I believe the total cost for that was about 9 billion. And then in the budgets, they basically said, look, this is what we're doing for working people. But when it's come to pensioners, of course, pensioners aren't working people. But the Labour Party has the idea, rightly or wrongly, that the majority of pensioners don't vote for them. So if they think these people don't vote for us, working people do vote for us, and they're a better long-term prospect for our party to have working people on our side, it's better for us to get money off pensioners while keeping working people happy. Now, if you're doing it because they're the people who voted for you, that is wrong, utterly, utterly wrong. And as I said before, this whole thing about NHS England being abolished, they're not abolishing health quangos, there's 27 of them, but they are abolishing this one quango. So why are they abolishing this one quango, but they're not abolishing all the others? The answer quite simply is because NHS England commissioned the Cass report that basically reported that puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones are doing enormous amount of harm to children and they have to be stopped. And it basically forced the government to stop doing it. And they were furious with NHS England for commissioning this report. So they're abolishing it. Now, that's just vindictive. And this government, I've never known a government like it, for basically being vindictive towards people that, as far as they're concerned, don't support them or have done things they don't like.
Yeah. I'm asked many times during the day a question. Have we got to wait for 4 years to get rid of them? Is there a circumstance that they could be ousted before that time?
Well, the only way they're going to be ousted before that time if Labour MPs turn on them, which, well, I think Labour MPs will turn on Starmer. I think they already are. I think there's 80 that have basically signed a motion to say they're not going to support benefit cuts. Now, if Labour MPs turn on Keir Starmer, because, well, the primary reason they're going to do it is because they think they're going to lose their seats, then he's going to be in big trouble. Yeah, and there's one other thing I'd like to say, and that is earlier on you mentioned Margaret Thatcher and the poll tax. You see, what happened there was that Margaret Thatcher, when she was first elected, was said that she would look at alternatives to the rating system because she felt it was very unfair. She stood in the 1983 election on the basis that, well, we've looked, but we haven't found a better alternative. And then when it came to the 1987 election, she said, we pledge that whatever happens, we will find an alternative before the next election. And we'll be working very hard on finding an alternative to the rating system. And so she pledged that she will bring in an alternative. Basically, she couldn't find a better alternative. And she eventually decided that the poll tax was the only better alternative she could find. It was a disaster. It was a total disaster. But she was extremely reluctant to go for it. And she knew that it may not work. That's the reality of it.
What I've never understood about the poll tax is that she or somebody looked at a household with maybe 5 wage earners and thought, well, yeah, it's a way of raising money and a fairer way. Why should one old age pensioner pay the same as 5 people who are working? That is just and fair. What was the problem?
Well, yes, but you see, um, the council tax, as it is now, is actually a much better system. But it's actually a mixture between the old rating system and the poll tax, because it's like, you have more people pay, but it is still it is still related to the value of your house or to the sort of house you live in. But they also shifted a lot of money from local authorities back to central government, which then they tried to shift it back again. But anyway, all I'm saying is that it was something she knew right from the beginning was going to be a major problem. And it just didn't work. I mean, it was a mistake, but it was a mistake that she knew was coming in a sense.
Yes. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, before we leave the subject completely, let's stay with the councils.
Yeah.
More bad news. Gold-plated pensions. These people are making lots of misery for lots of people, and at the same time are accepting even an ordinary council worker, inverted commas, is getting £50,000 a year pension, dynamic pensions, and as we know, that means including cost of living as it goes by. Nobody's on that kind of a pension these days, or very few. And a lot of people are earning, pension-wise, over £100,000 a year. And on average, if you compare the public and the private sector, that's almost 3 times. Not bad, is it? Just keep your mouth shut. Behave yourself. You're going to finish up very, very well off.
Yeah, well, it is a major issue, how much people are earning in the public sector, and it can be a very cushy job. I mean, you also get a nice cushy pension to go with normally with working in the public sector, and the pressure is a lot less. It's much easier to work from home and do very little in some instances. Whereas when you're in the private sector, if you say I'm working from home, it'll be like, what have you done? We need to know what you've achieved while you've been working from home, and it's like, have you done this? Have you done that? More work part. I mean, some of the pressure for people working in the private sector is phenomenal. But it's a very, very different world working for a council or working for the government. Very different, or working for a quanga.
Indeed, it is. We'll leave Sir Keir alone for a short while and go through over the pond to the Donald and trade deals going on. And we've got the first one. But if you analyse it, it's buttons. That's the one with India is buttons. The Pacific Rim one that was done a couple of years ago is probably better. But there we are. We've got to put up with beef. At least the Donalds has said that we're not going to fill it full of antibiotics. So that meets our requirements. Gone quiet on the chicken, whether they've got chlorine in. But anyway, we've got a deal. But the people in the know are saying, don't wag your tail, Britain. It's nothing. The only reason you've been allowed to be the first is part of the plot to get China in place where they should be. Now, the Donald can go along to China and say, well, this is the first of many. It looks behind closed doors that they've done some deal with China at the moment. But again, something is coming out about that, and it's coming from the Donald and Co. Basically, he is fed up, and in my humble opinion, he's right. China is flooding markets with tat, utter tat. And he
Yeah.
used as an illustration, how many dolls does your daughter want? 50? Well, she can have them because that's equivalent to 2 decent dolls from a decent West manufacturer, because it will last and be with your daughter until she's a teenager. The Chinese doll will last weeks or even months. That's an illustration. Now, along with that illustration, don't forget, half the exports of China are electrical. They seem to do a bit better, and we still need China. But China has put herself in a position where we still need her, despite the fact that some of the stuff coming over is rubbish. Even cars. You can't get electric cars from China, many of them, insured because they're that badly made. So there is a payback. Is it better to pay a little bit extra and get some homemade goods? In the long run, it's cheaper.
Well, yes, but if we look at the general situation of what Donald Trump is doing, you see, he announced all these tariff increases. Now, the first thing I want to say is this. in my view, when you've got a big trade imbalance, tariffs are necessary. Now, this is what I think is so ridiculous about how we left the European Union, because when we left the European Union in 2016, we had an 88 billion trade deficit with the EU. So the sensible thing for us to do would have just been to leave and impose tariffs on the EU goods. Because if we impose tariffs on their goods and they impose tariffs on our goods, obviously their goods coming to us were a lot more than ours going to them. So we gain. We gain enormously. Now, we didn't do that. Instead, for some reason, they said we've got to have a free trade agreement. And the result of having a free trade agreement is that our deficit is actually slightly less, but it's in real terms, it's now 96 billion pounds compared with 88. But in real terms, that's actually less because in real terms it will be 114 compared with 88. So we've still got a massive trade deficit with the EU and it's going on. Now, what Donald Trump has done is said, we've got a massive trade deficit with the EU, which they had in the US. So what I'm going to do is impose tariffs on all the EU cars that are coming over here. And I'm imposing tariffs on aluminium and steel and so on and so forth. And it's going to be 25% across the board. Now, that and he produced his chart to show that at the moment they're charging a lot more tariffs on US goods, or they're actually putting things in place to stop US goods going to the EU, which is why we've got this massive deficit. And I'm going to put things right. I'm going to make it fair. Now, what he's done with the UK is that he's imposed 25% tariffs on UK steel and aluminium, and then basically announced a trade deal with the UK, where he's removed the tariffs that he's just imposed in return for us accepting US beef and so on and so forth. So all he's done is just taken off the tariffs that he's only just imposed in order for preferential treatment of US goods. But we don't have a big imbalance with US trade. It's virtually equilibrium. Sometimes we have a small surplus, sometimes they have a small surplus. So, he doesn't need to impose tariffs on US goods. But as Kemi Badenoch has very cleverly pointed out, what's actually happened, if you look at it over a 2-year period, is that the tariffs that the US imposed on UK goods were 3.4. They're now gone up to 10%, which is less than the EU, but it's still more than it was before. And the tariffs that we're imposed on the US goods were 5%, but under this deal, we've now reduced them to 1.8%. So Donald Trump has negotiated, if you look at it over a 2-year period, a substantial reduction in tariffs on US goods in return for a substantial increase on UK goods. That's the deal. Now, to be quite honest with you, I don't think anyone will be surprised because Donald Trump is very good at negotiating. He's very good at doing deals, and he's not going to do a deal that's not in his advantage. Now, with China, it's gone on a much, much bigger scale because he imposed on China tariffs up to 125%. The problem was the markets didn't like that at all. And China started imposing tariffs on US goods in response at a lower level, but still very substantial tariffs. Now, what Trump has now said is that, okay, I've negotiated with China a reduction in the tariffs, but all he's doing is negotiating a reduction in these massive tariffs that he imposed. And he's doing the same with them as he did with the UK. If you look at it back on a 2-year level, and China is still substantially worse off.
Indeed, and touching on this and part of the deal, which sounds a bit odd if you think about it, but as you get into it, it's not, was the fact that he doesn't want Britain to allow any more China deals into Britain. Cells that they plant everywhere all over the world, especially Africa and South America. And you think, well, it's got to do with the trade deal. Well, it jolly well does. And I personally applaud that. And I'm going to link that as well to something that's happening in Iran. And again, a lot of people may not appreciate this. Iran, the Ayatollah there, are utter fanatics. He's 86 now. And if you think you've seen a Muslim that's fanatical, well, go to Iran and see what is really happening. They have an agenda. They have the following things to back it up. They're a nuclear power. Okay, enriched uranium is still at 3.4%. You need 90% to get up to missile strength. That can be done in weeks, in actual fact. You've got latest, very quick missiles, secondly. And thirdly, you've got the cells all over the world. Now, let's not be naive about this. The object of Islam from Iran is to get 313 cantons worldwide, like Switzerland, if you wish, under their control. That's why the cells are being planted. They've even, would you believe, got a clock in one of their squares, and it goes to 2040. And at that date, that's the end of Israel. It says that on the clock. This is when Israel will be destroyed. Countdown now. Now, that's how fanatical they are. Thankfully, at least we've got Saudi Arabia, who hate the regime.
Mhm.
And they are doing all they can to stop anything happening of this nature. But that is the aim. That is their sight. And come on, Sid, how many fanatical Muslims are we letting into the Western world? Not just Britain, other parts as well.
Yeah. It's a fundamental part of Islam is that they hate Jews, and radical Muslims, actually carry out what Muhammad said. I mean, Muhammad said, well, he was quoted as saying on one occasion, if you see a Jew behind a rock, then kill him. And, there's actually a verse in the Quran that's burn the Jews with fire. I mean, it is fundamental to Islam, I'm afraid. And
I mean, it's a religion not of peace, is it, and love?
no, absolutely not. I mean, because you got numerous sword verses in the Quran. I mean, the Quran says that you should kill disbelievers, wage war against those who don't believe in Allah, and so on and so forth. No, it's a very violent religion. And one thing about Muhammad, is that there's a lot of myths, I believe, about his life and history. But one thing we do know is that he was extremely violent, and there's numerous records of him actually getting a lot of people from the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza, making them dig to their own trenches and then burying them in these trenches up to their necks. And then Muhammad himself came with his sword and cut off all their heads. That's in more than one narrative. So he was very violent, bloodthirsty individual. If you want to know, by the way, the actual real story of Muhammad is that my understanding is that he was brought into the situation where the Byzantine Empire, which was the remains of the old Roman Empire based in Turkey, had been fighting the Persian Empire, which is based in Iran that we've been talking about. And these two empires had both gone south. They've both been in Israel, they've been in Egypt, they've been whatever. But they fought each other to a standstill. And they had a massive battle, which actually the Byzantines won, but they lost so many soldiers in winning the battle that they didn't have the capacity to impose themselves on Arabia and Israel and all that area where they had been before. So Muhammad, being a leader of the Arabs, basically summoned his people and said, "Look, the empire's gone. We can rule ourselves." And he led his people to basically take self-control away in a situation in a vacuum. but he became a hero of the Arabs. I mean, he was an absolute hero because he had basically delivered self-government for them, where previously they'd been under all these empires. Uh, the idea of him being a prophet, I don't even know where that came from, frankly. He was never a prophet. He was always a very bloodthirsty individual. I think all the stuff about him being a prophet all came up afterwards, or maybe it was something that he tried to bring up himself in order to make the case for him being obeyed and followed. I don't know, but I mean, he was never a godly man or a spiritual man. I mean, he was always a bloodthirsty warrior.
Interesting. Um, so here we've got you in our sights again, I'm afraid. We have a rearrangement of the deck chairs on the Titanic again, in many people's opinion, with this great new scheme for keeping the immigrants out of the United Kingdom. At least now he recognises that there's a problem. Hitherto, it's never been mentioned, but he thinks, oh, yeah, we have a problem of a divided nation now. Well, yes. Now, is it beyond the wit of man to come together as an example, not saying this is the right way of going about it, get all of Europe to agree to a country or, I don't know, sharing the burden? And all the immigrants go to Romania, to Hungary, or Poland, or wherever, or France, wherever. And they go in a special encampment and they are processed quickly as possible. And then they are released to whichever country they want to go, as long as they pass the test of truth. And are you really fleeing from persecution? That's the major truth, of course. Now, why can't we build a neutral zone, if you wish, that can be done? Never get Europe to agree on all that lot, would we?
No, we wouldn't. But I think we have to understand what's going on, and I'm afraid it's very much similar to the previous discussion. You see, it's not just going on in the UK; it's going on, like you say, throughout Europe, and it's also going on in the United States. It's going on in a lot of other countries. Have suddenly got enormous number of immigrants that are suddenly appearing in their borders. It's estimated that under Biden, a total of 5 million people entered the United States illegally. 5 million, which is a phenomenal number of people, frankly, to arrive illegally into a country. But see, the records show that there's something like, there's over 300 million Christians being persecuted worldwide in one country or another. And if people are fleeing persecution, it ought to be Christians who are fleeing persecution who are arriving in the UK. But interestingly enough, I mean, on this point, I mean, I remember when we had a Conservative government, it's not that long ago, just over a year ago, there was somebody in Pakistan, a Christian woman in Pakistan, who was facing incredible oppression. And Fiona Bruce, God bless her, the Member of Parliament for Congleton, not the journalist, was, the champion, the Prime Minister's representative for religion and belief, was basically pressurising the Home Office to allow this person to come to the UK. And the Home Office said no. And basically, she said, I've done all I can to try and get this person to be allowed to come to the UK. But the Home Office have said no. Somebody who was obviously facing persecution, no question, and somebody who was in need of refuge somewhere. But our government said no. But the people coming over here are almost entirely Muslims. And they're saying they're coming from countries like Afghanistan and so on and so forth. But we don't know they're coming from Afghanistan because in most cases they throw away their passports. They don't come here with passports that, you can say, here's my passport, this is who I am, stamp it. They throw away their passports and just arrive in boats and say, just give any old name and say they've come from Afghanistan, and they say they've come from Afghanistan because they know they can't be sent back there because people are being persecuted there. So the government has a policy of not sending anyone back to Afghanistan, so they all say they've come from Afghanistan. But what's really going on, I'm afraid, whether we like it or not, is this is a deliberate crusade to make the West more Islamic, which includes the whole of Europe and includes the United States of America. I mean, they're actually building massive mosques now in America based on the people that have come there illegally. And America had very few mosques, but all of a sudden they've got mosques cropping up all over America, just as it's happening in the UK, just as it's happening in Germany, it's happening in Italy, it's happening all over Eastern Europe. So it's what's happening is a crusade to make the West Islamic. Now, either we understand what's going on and say, no, we're going to stop it, or we just allow it to happen and pretend it's people that are in great need that we have to offer asylum because they need help. It's not that at all.
Is Nigel and Reform going to get away over the hotels? He's hired a top KC barrister, and he's got quite a lot of pro bono help from lawyers. It's a very good team, actually. And basically, they're going to take local authorities to court if they suddenly come along. Oh, we'll have that hotel and stuff it full of migrants. That's going to please a lot of people in constituents, isn't it, Sid?
Yes, and I wish him well. I think Reform have got a problem in that they're now running 10 councils, but they haven't got any manifesto for running these councils. So, and all their councillors, I mean, with very few exceptions, have got no experience. So some of them may have defected from the Conservative Party or the Labour Party for that matter, and may have had experience of being councillors before, but none of them have got any experience of being Reform councillors because Reform didn't have any councillors, and all of a sudden now they've got 600 or 700 of them. And as I say, running 10 councils. So it's going to be very difficult for them. Now, the only policies that Reform have got that are clear policies are policies on immigration and policies on the EU. Their other policies are very thin and very weak. So we'll have to really basically see what they do, because what they do will be very, very interesting. I mean, it is understandable that they're going to say, well, we're going to take major action over immigration. And that may be one thing that they can actually say when they're running the councils. This council is no longer going to accept anyone in hotels, as long as we're running the council. Good luck to them. Good luck to them.
Well, let's as we draw to the end of our time, think of something positive.
Mm.
That being, this will please you, Sid. More and more of private schools are saying to rugby people, would you sooner play soccer, become a soccer person? And big numbers here, they're changing to soccer. Now, there's been a lot of bad press and true press, maybe, about head injuries. You see, it's the footballer heading the ball. I tell you what, it's much worse in rugby, scrums, etc. And they're now saying, well, for whatever reason, then try soccer. That's good news, is it?
I enjoy both sports, frankly. I mean, but I enjoy just about every sport. I mean, I enjoy Formula One, I enjoy tennis. It's like, so I'm not the right person to ask, really. I really enjoy watching the Six Nations. I think it's very exciting games to watch. Um, in some ways, I think I could say I probably enjoy it more than watching football because, it's with football, it's like you can watch a game like one I was watching last night that was ended up 0-0. No one actually scored a goal. Well, you never have a game of rugby where no one scores a point. So it's very interesting. I mean, I enjoy watching. I really do enjoy watching rugby, but Ultimately, we'll have to see. I mean, if we do stop playing rugby in private schools, then it's certainly going to affect the performance of the home nations without a shadow of doubt, because the majority of the players do come from private schools.
Yeah, it's the pipeline.
Mm.
Last week, the week before, we were mentioning what things you would change, and it was a bit of a quiz for you. In the soccer world, we mentioned silly socks have gone a bit over the top. Also, oversized benches. Now there's almost a football team waiting to come on these days as reserves. Good thing or not?
Um, it's hard to say really because I think I think it's inevitable really that well certainly when we talk about the Premier League that they will have large squads because they can't afford a situation where if players get injured and players do get injured, they've got no one to come in. And they've got to have people there that are able to come in. And if you've got a squad of 30 players, which most Premier League clubs do have these days, then you've got to try and keep all your 30 players involved and occupied to one degree or another. I mean, I know they have things like the League Cup, for instance, when they play all their second string players and indeed play youth players. I mean, to try and bring them in as well. Um, but it makes sense if you've got a large squad to be able to make it possible to be able to bring more players into the game, during the game, and it can also players can also get well these days. Football is being played at a very high tempo. You're expected to do a lot of running around on the pitch during the match. You don't have forwards that just stand on the halfway line waiting for the ball to appear. I mean, they're expected to track back and defend when they need to defend, and then race up the pitch if you get the ball. And all the players are expected to race up the pitch and then race back again if they lose the ball. I mean, that's the modern game of football. And since that's happening, obviously players can get tired. So to bring on a fresh pair of legs can be very advantageous. So I think it's a good thing having it possible to have a large number of substitutes in a game. Whether it's a good thing that clubs are allowed to have 30 players on their books, for the season, I'm not quite so sure. I think probably maybe if you had a maximum of 25 players for each team, I think that might well be a good thing.
Yeah, interesting. We've got to finish on one thing that, again, part of what you've answered there. Manchester United and Spurs have got a cup final,
Yes.
and that's more than interesting, especially if you look at the terrible results both teams have this season in the Premiership,
Yeah.
especially Manchester United since Amorim came.
Yeah.
It's all right saying that you can rush up and down the pitch, Sid, but when you're playing ultra zonal football and you can only pass it back and sideways, you've got a real problem. And when Amarin is saying, "I'm not going to alter this," look at your results, man,
Yeah.
compared with even the managers that failed. Is he
Yeah.
so inflexible that it's going to come against him, Sid?
This game is going to be absolutely phenomenal because one of them, Manchester United or Spurs, is going to get in the Champions League if they win the Europa League. And that's worth, I reckon, 100 million. The other team, the one that loses, won't be in Europe because they're way down in the league. So it's a phenomenal game. And sometimes in order to win games, you have to play unattractive football. I mean, you probably remember the days of Graham Taylor and the long ball, which everyone got fed up with the long ball, but the long ball used to win games for how can I say, teams that had nowhere near the skill of other teams. So, and I think sometimes you do find teams that are on the ropes that will revert to the long ball in order to get out and to move forward. So that part of football hasn't been entirely lost. And for this one game, I think you could well find that different tactics are employed because it's so, so important for both teams to win. So important. And I have to say that I think probably Manchester United want it a little bit more than Spurs. I mean, Spurs want it, no question. But I think Manchester United probably want it just a little bit more because 100 million is just means so much. And being in the Champions League means so much. And we'll have to wait and see. I don't think either current manager will keep their job, frankly. I think both of them have not performed as they were expected to do. And I think both teams will be looking for a new manager next season, whatever happens.
Yeah, back to Australia, back to Portugal. Take your pick. Sid, thank you so much. And at least we defeated you with the football questions. Uh, the politics you red hot on. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.